Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for Spirit, the stimulating program initiative for retirees that inspires thought. I'm Judy Steinig, Director of Community Programs for the Orthodox Union, and it's my honor to coordinate and host this program. The OU created Spirit several years ago as an on-site program, and now we're happy to present it in a virtual setting for baby boomers, retirees, not yet retirees, empty nesters, sandwich generation parents, and seniors, all of whom are looking for educational, intellectual, physical, and physical stimulation. Since we are all still sheltering in, Spirit is the perfect way for all of us to engage online. This week, we've been featuring a two-part program on a topic that affects every single one of us: memory and focus. How many times do we get up to get something and then can't remember what it was that we wanted to get? We do so appreciate that Rena Yudkowsky, who's speaking to us from Israel, reached out to offer this program. Rena is a memory coach and geriatric social worker, and she's been providing some very important techniques and strategies for us. As I said before, we've been doing it this week. Part one was Tuesday, and everyone who registered for that program received the recording Tuesday afternoon. Everybody who is on this who has registered for this program, whether you are on it live or whether you're going to tune in later, will be getting the recording later this afternoon. And I'm going to also include Monday. So everyone will have a full set again later today. We thank Rena so much for this program, and I'm happy to turn it over to her now. Thank you, Rena.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Reverend Steinig, for organizing all these very special programs. It sounds amazing. Everything you've been doing for the past couple months. So kol hakavod to you. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. Again, for those of you that were here on Tuesday, we're going to continue. For those of you that were not here on Tuesday, I will review and catch you up a little bit. So don't worry about that. And I was so overwhelmed by the response from Tuesday. Thank you to everyone who took the time to email me and give me positive feedback. It means a lot to me. And I answered all the emails personally, and it was really fun to connect with those of you that emailed me, and I really encourage you to do that. So a bunch of people actually requested me to talk about how to remember names. Names is a hot topic. We all want to be able to remember names, right? So after we finish the T's, the TEAS, which we started on Tuesday about focus, we'll finish that, and then I'll give you a quick tip on names. So we're going to go for a little longer today than we did on Tuesday. I got permission to go a little longer. So here we go. Let's review what we did. I'm going to share my screen. This is the flyer that you got. Reverend Steinig sent this out to everyone after Tuesday's talk. So on this flyer, you have the TEAS, which is the acronym that we're working from to help us improve our focus. And at the bottom, you have my email, my website, my Facebook group, so you can get in touch with me. I'm happy to connect with anyone that wants to connect with me in any way you want to connect. So I'm not even going to bother introducing myself again because Reverend Steinig did that, and because I talked a lot about what I do on Tuesday, so I'm going to assume that you got that. If you want more information about me, I'm happy to share that another time. So how to improve focus to improve memory. Okay, I'm going to leave this up on the screen so it's in front of you, so you can take notes or write it down or do whatever you want with it. So T's, TEAS, that's the acronym we're working from. It's 4 ways to improve focus. By the way, this is my acronym. I came up with this. And the T, we said, stands for task, one task at a time. We talked about the dangers and the pitfalls of multitasking, which we're all very tempted to do, and we all do, unfortunately. But it trips up our brain, and we suffer from it. We're more stressed, we're less creative, and when we try to do too many things at once, we find we're all of a sudden forgetting. But what I explained is it's not forgetting, it's we're not staying focused or being focused on what we're trying to do. So in the long run, if you can slow it down a bit and do one task at a time, you're going to end up accomplishing a lot more and doing each task more fully. And we gave a lot of examples of that the other day. So I'm going to move on to the E. The E is environment. We said that our environment is very important to helping us either remember and focus or not focus. So we talked about if you're reading something that you want to remember, or you're writing something that takes focus, or you're listening to a class or a shiur, if there's background noise, or the lighting isn't good, or there's too much clutter, or there's a lot of disruptions, you are not going to be able to focus. So in order to put ourselves in a win-win situation, we want to build a conducive environment to learning and remembering. Same thing with davening. When you go to daven, if there's a lot of noise or people around and a mess, and you're not using a sitter, that's not a conducive environment to focusing on our davening. So our environment is a really important part, and we could create an environment that's going to help us focus and remember. So that was the T and the E. I believe that's what we got up to. I mean, I expounded on it, obviously, on Tuesday, but we're going to move on now to the A. The A of the T's is automatically. And we want, it says here, don't do things automatically. Because what happens? I come into my house, I'm holding my keys, I throw my keys down on the coffee table. My head is thinking about what I'm making for supper, where are my kids, who do I need to call? I forgot to do that. So my hands threw the keys down, but my head was in 100 other places. Because we do things automatically without any intention, without thinking about it. That's why we quote unquote forget, but it's not really forgetting. And this awareness alone could help calm us down and help us realize that if we can simply bring our focus to what we're doing, even just for a few seconds, that will help us remember. So let me rewind that situation that I just presented. Now I walk in, and instead of my hand throwing my keys down on the coffee table, I'm going to put them down, and I'm going to hear them clink. And I'm going to watch my hand drop the keys. And I'm going to say out loud, I am now putting my keys on the coffee table. And that's actually the S, which I'll expound on in a minute. The S is using all your senses, and that's what I just did. But we're not doing it automatically anymore. Now we're being mindful. We're bringing my brain and my body to the same place so that it's aligned. And we can have a mental image, okay? Here's how the mental image works. I put my keys down, and what I'm doing is I'm making myself focus on what I'm doing just for 2 seconds. And all of a sudden I have a mental image. It looks like this, a genie popping out of my keys on the coffee table, okay? Can you do that? Can you close your eyes and imagine a genie popping out of your keys on the coffee table or wherever you put them down? If you don't like the genie image, you could use a bomb exploding. I live in Israel, so I don't like the bomb exploding vision. That doesn't work for me. But if it works for you, great. So then what happens later when you need to go out and you say, where are my keys? Oh, all of a sudden this image of a genie popping out of your keys comes to you. Now you're going to say, Rena, that's ridiculous. And I'm going to say, right. And it works. It works because your mind thinks in pictures. So whatever you can imagine, whatever picture you can imagine, it's going to pop right back for you when you want to remember something. You can do this, the same thing with your keys, your glasses, your pocketbook, your phone, anything you want to remember where you put it, okay? The point is that we're not doing it automatically, unless people say, but I have a makom kavua, a set place for my keys. My keys go on the hook behind the door, or my keys go in this pocket of my pocketbook. So if that's the case, and you really are organized, and you really do the makom kavua, no problem. If that works, that's great. That's a great idea if you can do it. Some people cannot do it. They just can't be that consistent. But if you can, that's always the best idea. But otherwise, we're doing this with mindful thinking. We're putting things down with mindful thinking instead of just automatically and haphazard. So the next time you take your glasses off and put them somewhere, it's not your hand doing it. It's now your brain is engaged. And when your brain is engaged in the action, you are going to recall that action, okay? So that's the A for automatically. So we're not doing things automatically anymore. We're being much more mindful. Now, sometimes it's hard for us to do this because our mind is not calm. Our mind is jumping all over the place, right? And anyone know what I'm talking about when I say your mind is jumping all over the place? Give me some nods. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, okay. See some nods there. So our minds are jumping all over the place. So it's really hard for me to calm my mind down and focus. There's a term called monkey mind. A monkey mind is like a monkey swings from tree to tree. So our mind goes through endless loops of fears, frustrations, plans, schedules. And sometimes we get stuck in that loop and we ruminate, especially those of us that have a tendency towards anxiety, if any of you know what I'm talking about. Our minds sort of ruminate and we get stuck in that loop, and we need to stop doing that. So how do we stop doing that? Like, recently came across a very good technique. It's very simple. To calm our minds, basically you ask yourself some questions. Okay, so just remember the cue for questions. Questions are the answers. Ask yourself right now, am I aware of where I am and what I'm doing? Just, you stop everything you're doing and you just ask yourself, am I aware? And then you ask yourself some other questions. Where am I right now? What am I grateful for? What do I need most right now? These questions help you feel more centered and focused. So questions are the answer. We're asking ourselves some questions that are going to help us calm our mind down. What would help you feel more relaxed? What helps you to release the physical tension from the day? These are reasons that we may not be able to focus. We might feel too tense or too anxious, and it might be hard to focus. So just quieting down for a couple seconds, taking some deep breaths, and asking yourself these questions can be so grounding and centering. And then we say, okay, now I feel more focused to do what I need to do. If that's too complicated, skip the questions, just take a couple slow, deep breaths. Because when we take slow, deep breaths, it gets oxygen to the brain. And when we have a senior moment and we panic, we need oxygen. We need to get oxygen up there so that we can recall what we want. So even before I teach any techniques about recall, I always say, when you have a senior moment, just stop and take a deep breath or 2 deep breaths, because it'll get oxygen to the brain and you'll be able to think more clearly. Now, I didn't think this was rocket science when I taught this a couple months ago to one of my classes here in Israel. But the next class, a lady came back. She was well in her 80s. She came back and she said, Rena, that technique of breathing was amazing. I was walking down the street with my 19-year-old grandson, and we were trying to remember the name of a certain neighbor. And neither of us could remember. I took a deep breath, and then all of a sudden, I came up with the name of that neighbor before my 19-year-old grandson. She was so excited. She was so thrilled that she was able to recall that name just by taking a deep breath and calming herself down. It came to her. She was so, so impressed with herself. And she was like, that's simple. That's simple enough. And I just thought that, I teach a lot of great techniques. I just didn't think that was one of them. But after she came back and said it really worked for her, I was like, I'm gonna put the emphasis on this one. So it's as simple as some deep breaths that help us just focus our mind, stop the ruminating, and calm us down. Okay, so that is the A. The A is don't do things automatically. Engage your mind. Calm yourself down by focusing. Have a mental image of something powerful, funny, crazy that's going to really make you remember what you did with those keys or glasses or phone. It's funny when I posted in my Facebook group, what is the thing you misplace most? Like, what would you really like help with trying to figure out what do you misplace the most? And a lot of people answered me. I got a lot of engagement on that post. And the thing that most people wrote, their phone, right? Because you carry your phone with you all over, and if you don't have a pocket and you just keep putting it down in places. So I would suggest don't keep putting it down in places. Either have a makom kavua, a set place for your phone, so it's always in that place, unless you're talking on it. But when you finish talking on it, put it back in that place in your house, if that's possible. If not, you can wear one of these, they make one of these like pocket things they can put it on your neck or wear a crossbody where you put your phone in it and then it's on you all the time. Now, I know there are health concerns about keeping your cell phone on you all the time, but putting that aside, if you wear it on you in a little pouch, you can't lose it. So that's just, those are two helpful techniques in terms of losing your phone all the time. So it's putting it in the same place and wearing it on you. And the third thing is what I said before, which is you have a mental image of a bomb blowing up or a genie popping out of your phone when you put it down. The problem with that is that if you do it every 5 minutes, you're going to get tired of using that technique, or it's not going to work anymore because you're just putting it down somewhere else every few minutes. So that's the A of automatically. S. Okay, S really works. The S is senses. Use all your senses. What are our senses? Our senses are seeing, hearing, touching or feeling. That's like tactile. Smelling and tasting. Those are our 5 senses. And then we also have a 6th sense. What we call our 6th sense is intuition, or that inner feeling that you get when you meet people. You get a certain feeling about people. And we need to pay attention to that 6th sense as well, because it gives us information about people and helps us. Our impression of people when we meet them can help us remember their names. So S is senses. Now under the T's, it says here, your senses stimulate the brain. If you use one sense to make a memory, you have a 10% likelihood of remembering it 1 week later. But if you use 4 senses, you have a 97% likelihood of remembering it. That is a huge difference, 10 to 97%, and all you have to do is use your senses. So let's talk about how to do that. You can use your senses to remember these things. These are the examples we're going to talk about, and there's a lot more that you'll be able to use. That you locked the door, that you turned off the stove, that you took your medicine, and where you put things. So let's take the example of locking the door. How many of you have left your house and a couple minutes later or an hour later said, oh no, I can't remember if I locked my door? Has that happened to anyone here? Just nod your head if it has. Yeah? Not sure if you locked the door? That self-doubt can drive us crazy, right? Could drive us totally crazy. So we're going to get rid of that self-doubt now, because we're going to do it differently. We're not just going to put the key and turn it, leave, while our head is thinking about where we're going and that we're late and how to get there and da-da-da. Now we're going to feel the key in our hands. We're going to look at the key. We're going to feel it. Is it hot or cold? Look at it. Is it round, square, oval? What shape is that key? Is there a color keychain on it? And you're going to put it in the door. You're going to lock it, and you're going to hear the click of the lock, and you're going to hear yourself slam the door. That's how you're using your hearing. And you're going to feel it. So we're feeling, we're seeing, we're watching our hand lock the door, and we're hearing the click and the slam. And then after you lock the door, you're going to say, I have now locked my door. And you're going to say it out loud. I have now locked my door. So that 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour and a half later, and you say, oi, did I lock my door? Yes, I heard myself say, I have now locked my door. Now, people say, but people are going to think I'm crazy because I'm talking to myself. And I tell them 2 things. Number 1, who cares? We don't care if anyone thinks you're crazy. You're going to remember whether you locked the door. And number 2, everyone's walking around these days wearing Bluetooth in their ears, right? They have these Bluetooths in their ears and they're talking to themselves. Don't you always see people walking down the street talking to the air, and then you realize they're wearing a Bluetooth? So I don't think we have to worry anymore that if we talk to ourselves, people are going to think we're crazy. This really works. I do this all the time, okay? And it absolutely works. So we're using our senses. That's the example if you lock the door. The next example, that you turned off the stove. This happens a lot. We put something on to cook. We leave the kitchen and it's burnt. We forgot. We say we forgot. We didn't forget. We got distracted. So the first thing you could do is don't leave the kitchen if you're cooking something. That's really good advice, actually. The second thing you could do is set a timer. But some people say, I set a timer and then I can't remember what the timer was for. So the answer to that is put a little note next to the timer that says check the rice, or turn off the stove, or put it on a lower flame. So you could use a combination of timer and notes, but that's actually external aids. I really want to go back to using our brains. So it looks like this. Now when I turn off the stove, I'm going to look at my hand. I'm going to feel the knob in my hand. I'm going to watch my hand turn off the stove. I'm going to move the pot because that's kinesthetic. I'm doing an action. I'm moving the pot to a different flame, and I'm hearing the fire go out. You know, depending whether you have a button or a knob, you can adjust to your examples, but I'm using my example. So you're feeling the pot, you're moving it, you're watching your hand turn it, you're feeling the knob in your hand, and then you're saying out loud, I now turned off the rice. So you then leave your house to go to wherever you need to go, and you go, uh-oh, did I turn off what was cooking? Yes, I did, because I said it out loud. I heard myself say, I am now turning off the rice. Okay, that's that example of cooking stuff. People get very concerned that they're going to burn their house down, God forbid. But this can really help you with that. And most importantly, it helps the self-doubt. We don't want to always be doubting ourselves. Did I remember? Did I not remember? Am I focused? Am I not focused? That self-doubt creates so much stress. We want to get rid of self-doubt, okay? So no longer is it did I, didn't I, can I, can't I. Now it's yes, I can, using this technique. Okay, that's the self-talk now. Yes, I can remember that I shut off the stove because I'm going to say it out loud. I'm going to watch my hand. I'm going to listen to the sound. Okay, the next one, that you took your medicine. How many times do you say, uh-oh, I'm not sure if I took my medicine today? So a lot of people use pill boxes, and that's easy because you take your medicine, and if you're not sure, you go back and look in the pill box. If it's empty, you took it. That's simple. But either if you don't have a lot of medicine to take, or if for some reason that technique does not work for you, how are you going to remember that you took your medicine? So I would put them in my hand. I would put all the pills in my hand. I would look at them and count them. Hopefully they're not so many. And think to yourself, what is this for? Is this for cholesterol? This is for blood pressure. This is for anxiety, whatever. You could think to yourself what they're for. And you could taste. Most of them don't have a taste. Some vitamins have a bitter taste. Omega has a fishy taste. You could taste if that's appropriate. And then you say to yourself, I now took my medicines, okay? Now you're going to say to me, but how do I know if that was today or yesterday or the day before, right? I'm preempting the questions because first of all, the chat's disabled. And second of all, because I've done this a lot of times and I know what the questions are. So you're going to say, but how do I know if I took my medicine today or yesterday or the day before? Because I heard myself say I took my medicine today, right? So I think the answer to that is that our brains filter out whatever we don't need. So 3 weeks ago, I said to myself, yeah, I took my medicine, but I no longer need that in my working memory and not even in my storage. So in my course, I actually teach the process of memory, how memories are made. Very simple. I simplify it. I'm not a neurologist, so I keep it simple. And after every stage of memory, which there are only 3 that I talk about, there's like a little garbage can. There's like a little filter. So whatever we don't need gets filtered out right away. So what I'm saying is that when you take your medicine today and you say, I took my medicine today, and then later today you say, did I take my medicine? Yeah, I remember hearing it. What happened yesterday and the day before and the day before, I think it gets filtered out once we don't need it. That is the way I understand this process. Again, you can also use those mental images, which you have to get good. You have to be a little creative to make them. But again, in my course, we practice making creative images so that you get good at it. And then you can use these images to remember anything you want, actually. Okay, so that's whether you took your medicine or not. Number 4, where you put things. So that's the example I gave before with the keys. And I jumped ahead to senses because it just came to me because it's such a good technique. So when I put something down, instead of just my hand putting something down in my mind somewhere else, now it looks like I hear it go down on the table. I watch my hand drop my phone, my glasses, or whatever I'm putting down. I say out loud, I'm putting my glasses on the table. Okay? So next time you're looking for your glasses, I know where they are because I heard myself say, I'm putting them on the table. You can also use this. I'm going to use a few more examples. I have a few more examples to give for this. how can you use your senses to remember if you benched or said a bracha, right? This happens a lot. We make a bracha or we bench and we can't remember whether we did or not. We can't remember if we said Ya'aleh v'yavo or not. So if you bench from a bencher, right? You open up that bencher, the sitter, the bencher, and you look inside and you use your finger, you are seeing the words, and you bench out loud, you are so much more likely to remember that you actually did it. So it's pointing to the words, looking inside, saying it out loud, even singing. If you sing it, you're much more likely to remember that you said that you did it. The joke in my house used to be that on Rosh Chodesh, Mommy daven the most Shmona Esreis. You know why? Because I used to forget Ya'aleh v'yavo, so I would have to daven again. So the joke always was that I daven the most Shmona Esreis on Rosh Chodesh. But now we have a couple techniques to help us with that. Number one, my kids sometimes make me a big sign in the living room where I daven Ya'aleh v'yavo, or I put a little note in my sitter to remind me, or when I start saying Shmona Esrei, I focus and I remind myself. I say to myself, today's Rosh Chodesh, remember Ya'aleh v'yavo. I don't always say it out loud, but I say it to myself. Today's when I start Shmona Esrei, so that when I get to it, hopefully I'll remember. Today's Rosh Chodesh, remember Ya'aleh v'yavo. Now, if you're in shul, they usually clap on the bima and say Ya'aleh v'yavo, and they remind you. So that's always helpful. Another person reminding you is always helpful. But what happens from the beginning of Shmona Esrei when I reminded myself to when I get to Ya'aleh v'yavo? A lot of thoughts could come and go, right? So again, if I'm looking inside and I'm paying attention to what I'm doing, I'm much more likely to remember to do it and to remember that I did it. And again, when I get to Ya'aleh v'yavo, I want to remember to do it, and then I want to remember that I did it. So even though we don't say it out loud, I say it clearly and intentionally to myself, so that I know for sure that I did it. There's no questions afterwards whether I said Ya'aleh v'yavo, because I stop, I focus. Even if I wasn't focused before, when I'm saying Ya'aleh v'yavo, I focus on every word, and I'm intentional about it. It's not like, oh, mumbling some words. It's intentional. And it might take several tries of me bringing my brain back to where my body is, realigning my brain and refocusing on the fact that I'm standing before the King of Kings. Shivisi Hashem L'negdi Samid. That imagery is strong, right? Imagine Hashem in front of you, because that imagery of being in front of the King helps you focus on what you're doing. So even if I have to keep bringing myself back, when I get to Ya'aleh v'yavo, I'm intentional about it. So that afterwards, it's not a question of, didn't I? Okay? So those are probably some of the same issues that I imagine some of you have. Okay, another example. You want to remember important appointments, right? You made an appointment and you want to remember to go to the appointment. So obviously you're going to write it down on your calendar. Now, some people have a hard time with calendars. Some people have told me they write it down and they don't look at their calendar. I'm assuming for you, those of you that are leading busy lives, even if you're not leaving your house that much, important appointments go on a calendar and you check that calendar. Now, you could set timers. You could do different things to remind yourself. It could pop up on your computer. There's all sorts of outside reminders. But what I want to say is using this technique of using your senses. So you have a doctor's appointment, let's say tomorrow is June 26th, right? So I actually teach a technique to remember numbers, and you could use that technique to remember numbers. Like you could make the date a number. But it's 6/26, right? You guys in America say 6/26. Here we say the 26th day of 6, but we'll do it your way. 6/26. And you want to remember that you have an appointment tomorrow. So first of all, you're going to write it down and you're going to say it out loud. My appointment is on 6/26. And you're going to imagine yourself even walking into that. Let's say it's a podiatrist appointment. So you're going to imagine, you can have an imagery of yourself like tripping over your toes into the podiatrist appointment. And you can even hear yourself saying 6/26 and tripping over your toes. It sounds ridiculous, but the more ridiculous it is, the more likely it is to remember. Things that are funny, absurd, colorful, vivid, and emotional, you remember. I'll say that again. Things that are colorful, vivid, absurd. What else did I say? Vivid, absurd, colorful, funny, and emotional, you remember. Because the part of the brain called the amygdala that's involved in emotion and learning is strong. Emotion activates our memories, put it that way. Things that are very emotional, you remember. So if you have something mundane to remember, like a doctor's appointment, give it emotion and then you'll remember it. Make up a joke about it. Have a funny image. That's using your senses to remember something as mundane as a doctor's appointment, okay? Now you can actually take the date 6/26 and make something and do something fun with that. You just associate, what does that mean to you? 6/26. I don't know what that means to you. Maybe it's, maybe it's a special date to you. Maybe it's 62/6. So maybe 62 is your age and 6 is the amount of children you have. You give it meaning, make it meaningful, and then you're going to be able to remember it more easily. Now that is a technique that I talk about with names, numbers, and lists of items, and we practice it out. I'm just throwing it out there because I mentioned this doctor's appointment. But make it meaningful, because when it's meaningful to you, you will remember it, right? If I say my name is Rena Yudkowsky, that means nothing to you until I give it meaning. And when I teach names, I really give it meaning. I show a picture of my family dressed up as cows for Yudkowsky. And it's so funny. And I pass the picture around. And I guess on Zoom, I'm going to have to hold it up. And after that, my name takes on meaning. And we work it through. Like it's a whole technique and we practice it. So this is the T's. T-E-A-S. T stands for one task at a time. The E stands for build a conducive environment. The A stands for don't do things automatically. And the S stands for use all of your senses. Now, another tip using this, when you leave your house, let's say before you leave your house, there's a couple things you want to do. You can make a sign on the back of your door that says Gemach, Gimel, Mem, Chet. Gemach. Gimel stands for gas. Did I turn off the gas before leaving my house? Mem stands for Mafteach. Did I take my key or lock my door? And Chet stands for Chashmal. Did I turn off the lights and air conditioning? So you ask yourself Gemach. We all know what a Gemach is, right? Gimel, Mem, Chet. Gimel stands for gas, Mafteach, and Chashmal. And you can ask yourself before you leave, you just do a quick check. Again, using your senses. You're asking yourself this, you're saying it out loud. I turned off my air conditioning. I turned off my stove. I'm taking my key with me. And you do a quick check. It just focuses you to make sure that you're doing everything you need to do before you get out the door. So it's Gemach, Gaz, Mafteach, Chashmal. It's a funny thing. When I leave my house, I always forget to turn off my air conditioning in the summer. And when I come back, my husband says, you didn't turn off the air conditioning. And it's because, you know what? It's not important to me. It's not in the forefront of my mind. I'm not focused on that when I'm leaving the house. And quite frankly, it's not so important to me. And because actually, don't tell anyone, but I want it off when I come home. Here in Israel, we tend, if we leave for a couple hours, we do turn off our air conditioning. In America, a lot of people don't. They just leave it on. Here, we turn it off if we're going for a couple hours. So my husband's always nudging, did you turn off the air conditioning? I always forget. I forget because it's not important to me, which is another important thing about memory that I like to stress. You don't have to remember everything. No one has to remember everything. You get to choose what's important to you to remember. But I want you to have the techniques and the skill set that when something's important to remember, you can remember it if you want to. So we each get to choose what's important. So when I walk into a room with 30 people, it's important to me to remember people's names. So I have the techniques and I work really hard at it. Well, it's not so hard. If I practice the techniques, it's actually not so hard. The point being, you might walk into that room and say, I don't need to know everyone's name. I'm not even going to try. No problem. You don't have to try. We each get to decide what's important to us to remember. The point is that you can do it if you want to. And then you don't walk in and say, no way, I can't do that. There's no way in the world I can remember all those names. Because what you're telling yourself is that you can't. I believe we quoted on Tuesday Henry Ford, who said, Whether you believe you can or you believe you can't, you are right. So if you walk into a room with 30 people and say, I can't remember the names, there's no way you can. But if I walk in and say, I'm going to try, I can do this, I have the technique I need, then guess what? You are much more likely to succeed. So the self-talk piece of this is so important. How we talk to ourselves about our memory, and everything else, by the way, but now I'm talking about memory. How we talk to ourselves is going to influence how we succeed with memory. So the first step of succeeding in memory is telling yourself that you absolutely can do this. You just might need some techniques and focus. So now focus we just did. You have a lot of good information here about focus. What I would suggest is that you try these techniques. You try these 4 things over the next couple of days. When you have a senior moment or you feel very unfocused, try some of these techniques and see what works for you. I believe that they will work for you. You can even jot it down and email me what works for you. My email is at the bottom here. It's Rena@RenaYudkowsky.com. It's at the bottom of what I'm sharing on my screen. Rena@RenaYudkowsky.com. Tell me what worked. If something didn't work and you have a question, I'm happy to answer that as well. You can email me your questions. But these techniques do work. For these examples and other examples, you might come up with something else in your life that you need to focus on, and one of these techniques might be helpful. I'm happy to hear how this helps in other examples as well. Now, if you find that you are really concerned about yourself or a loved one, I would encourage you to follow up. You can go to a local memory clinic. You can call me. It says Memory Matters. That's the name of my business. I'm happy to coach you through and tell you whether to worry or not worry and what the next step is. But the awareness alone that you are not focusing in the first place on what you're doing is going to be helpful to you, because you're going to realize it's, in a lot of cases, it's actually not your memory, it's your focus. You did not pay attention to that in the first place. So therefore, you cannot remember it. But as soon as you use these techniques, the stop multitasking, building a conducive environment, not doing things automatically, and using your senses, you're going to find that you are going to be remembering things, and your senior moments hopefully are going to decrease in prevalence, hopefully. But if you're worried and you're not sure whether you're normal or not, I'm happy to try to help you assess that. I'm happy to point you in the right direction of a neurologist or a doctor. We don't want to ignore things that are concerning, but we also don't want to convince ourselves that we have memory loss when we really don't. So that is my goal. My goal is to increase people's confidence with this awareness. And I've taught this course many, many times, and people do come back and say the awareness alone was very empowering, because they realized that it wasn't their memory that was the problem. It was their focus and attention. Okay, so that's the T's. Now I want to go on to a little bit more about names. So most people go to a memory course because they want to learn how to remember people's names. What's so important about names? Well, it's the #1 business and social networking etiquette. When you go to meet, whether you're in business and you need to know your names, the clients' names. If you're a teacher, you need to know your students' names. If you have, a lot of grandchildren, you want to remember all those names. When you know someone's name, it makes them feel like $1 million, right? A person's name is the sweetest sound to them. People are always so impressed when I call people by their name. If it's someone that I only met once and then I see them a while later and I know their name and they say to me, how do you know my name? And I say, well, first of all, I care. So the first step of the names is you have to care. It needs to matter to you. Memory matters, right? So if you don't care to remember their names, it's going to go in one ear and out the other because it's not important to you. So it has to matter to you. It has to be important to you to remember. Okay, so it's going to matter to you and it's important to you. After that, you need to make sure you hear the name, because if I say my name is Rena, you can't remember that because you didn't even hear it. So if you did not hear the name in the first place, say to them, please repeat that. I didn't hear your name. Please say your name again. And what often happens is someone says their first name and their last name, and we sort of get stuck on their last name. We say, are you related to, or are you from, right? And we forgot their first name because it didn't even register in our conscious thought, because we automatically harped on the last name. So oftentimes we need to make sure we hear it and then comment on the name. Is the name an interesting name? Is it a name you don't know what it means? Maybe you're wondering what language that name is. Maybe it's the name of your sister, mother, brother. Comment, oh, I have a sister by that name. Or, oh, that's an interesting combination of names. Sometimes people have two names, right? Shira Devora, Sarah Rachel, Penina Hadassah, I don't know. And sometimes the combinations are interesting. So you could comment on it. Okay, so we're making sure we heard it. We're commenting on it. If it's a new name, you could ask how they spell it. And what you're going to do is you're going to repeat it over in the conversation. And this is only the first part of the longer technique that I teach. So this alone, this piece that I'm telling you now alone can help you with between like 25 to 50% of names. So the conversation looks like this. Hi, my name is Rena Yudkowsky. And you're going to say to me, hi, Rena, where are you from? I'm going to say I'm from Ramat Beit Shemesh. And you're going to say, Rena, how long have you been living in Ramat Beit Shemesh? And I'm going to say 20 years. No, I've been living here actually 15 years, but I've been in Israel 21 years, almost 21 years. And you're going to say, Rena, it's so nice to meet you. How many times did you just say my name? I think 4, right? In that short conversation, you said the name Rena 4 times. So what is that? Going back to the S of senses, you just heard yourself say my name 4 times. That alone is going to help you with so many cases. Because what happens? You meet someone, they say their name, and you continue talking. So you only heard the name once, and you didn't even pay attention to it. So now you're going to pay attention to it by repeating it back to them. Hi, Rena, it's so nice to meet you. Goodbye, Rena, it was lovely meeting you. Rena, where do you live? Okay, now you don't have to do it like incessantly so it gets annoying to the person you're talking to. But if you could repeat that name 3 or 4 times in a short conversation, you are much more likely to remember it. Okay, so this is the part I call, before I even get to the techniques, which I'll talk about in a minute, you need to care to remember someone's name. You need to hear their name. You need to comment on the name, ask about it, and you need to repeat it over a couple times in that conversation. And after that, I go into a more lengthy technique that it's not difficult, it's very simple, but it takes practice. So as part of my course, I do this. I actually teach the technique, and then we practice it with everyone. If I'm teaching live. If we're on Zoom, obviously I wouldn't be doing it with 250 people or however many people we have on here now, thank God. I would do this in a smaller group. And we practice it till we get it. And with practice, this is the technique. I teach the whole technique. It's the same technique that the big memory experts use to remember 100 or 200 people's names. The big memory experts can go into a room, meet 100 people, and then get up on stage. They say, everyone stand up. And they say, your name is, your name is, your name is. And when I say your name, sit down. And they can do a whole room of that. And it's amazing to watch. You can watch them do this on YouTube. There are videos of this. I love watching it. And I don't consider myself a huge memory expert, but I do know the technique, and I do practice the technique, and I can use it. I haven't challenged myself to do it with 100 people yet. So I'm not sure. I believe I can do it. I don't say I'm not sure. I believe I can do it, but I haven't tried. But I believe, because I'm doing that positive self-talk that I said before. So it's the same technique that all the big memory experts use. Now, you might not need to remember 100 people's names, but you might want to be able to remember your 3 people that you met at a shiur, or even 3 people you met at a Zoom webinar, or your grandchildren's friends, or your friends' grandchildren. Either way, that might be important to you. And you might feel like it's getting harder to recall names. And it might be hard to recall names because the name was not encoded properly in your brain. Encoded is the process of getting it from short-term memory to long-term memory. So if you don't do that process properly, which is part of the technique I teach, then it's going to be hard to recall. So it can be very embarrassing when you meet someone and you're supposed to know their name and you don't, and then you panic. It's like, why don't I know that name? But once you have the techniques, you can remember anyone's names. I'll tell you a funny joke. There are a couple, people make excuses when they can't remember people's names, right? So one of the funny ways to do it is you say, how do you spell that? But if you're talking to someone whose name is Cohen or Schwartz, it doesn't work, right? Then you're caught. Or sometimes you say, what's your first name again? Or they say, what's your name again? And they say their first name. And then you say, no, I meant your last name. And that's a way to get someone to tell you their name without really saying that you forgot. But those are just excuses. Really, you can remember a lot more names than you realize. And the techniques are very easy, very doable. Because this is something that a lot of people want to learn, I actually decided to put together a quick offer. Really, I only offer my whole course. But I just decided that so many people want to learn this technique that I can extract it out of my course and teach it as a master class. So I'll teach it like as a 2-part master class. And I actually have not offered this to anyone yet. So you guys are the first ones for this offer. And I'll just do that. We'll just do names. So I won't go into how memory works. I won't go into names, numbers, and everything I teach after. And my course is actually a 12-week course. But I'll just keep this real short and simple. It'll be 2-part master class. Each part will be an hour and a half. I'm going to try to run it in the middle of July. I'm thinking of doing this in 3 weeks. And it'll just give you the techniques. I'll teach it and practice it. It's not something that you want to learn without the practicing, which is the reason I can't teach it like on a webinar like this, because there's too many people and it takes a little longer than half hour or 45 minutes, just because I want to practice it so you get it. Because if you can watch any lecture or video on how to remember names, but that's not going to do it for you. You need to practice it. As with any good skill or technique, you need to practice it. I'm just going to put up here a link. 1 second. Let me just share my screen again. Nope, wrong one. 1 second. Let me go back to share my screen. That's document. Want to save changes. Hold on a sec. Okay, there you go. So I put together a quick offer. I've been thinking about this for a while because I wanted to find a way for people to get the technique to remember names, but not have to sign on to my whole course. Even though the course is amazing and I highly recommend it and the feedback has been fantastic, but it does involve, more time and more money. This is going to be a shorter, much cheaper offer. And this is the link, bit.ly/YouNameIt 2020. The name of it is You Name It. And it's going to be the technique to remember names. I will give this to Rebsen Steinig, and she will send this out with the replay as well. So if you don't have a pen and paper, you can't catch this. And when you go to this link, it tells you more about the offer. But I just decided to do this because I feel people are really asking me for it. And I know from the research that most people join a memory course because they want to learn to remember names, because it's so important to us. Because when we can remember a person's name, it shows that we care about them, right? The sweetest sound to a person is their name. And you can really impress people by knowing their names. So it's an important technique, and somehow we feel like it gets harder as we get older because it gets harder to pay attention. Like we were talking about focus, our focus gets distracted into a couple different places, especially when we meet people. Oftentimes when we meet someone new, there's outside distractions and there's inside distractions. We're thinking about other things, other people, where we're going, where we came from. And there's outside distractions, right? Let's say I'm with a friend and we meet another friend. There's usually a lot of other stuff going on around us. So we get very distracted. And that's another reason why it's hard for us to remember names. But when we learn to hone in our focus using the techniques that I taught, and when we learn that it really matters whether we remember people's names, and that if we care, we can definitely improve our memory in this area. And I hope that was helpful in terms of focus and attention. I hope I didn't give too much information. I don't want you to be overloaded, but you have that paper that you can refer back to. You can send me emails with questions, and I'm happy to hear feedback about what works and what doesn't work for you. And if you're interested in either the offer for You Name It or the full course, if some of you are saying that course sounds interesting, I'm happy to give you more information about it at a later date. And what time is it? Yeah, we're perfect. I want to thank all of you for joining, and I hope you enjoyed. I'm really grateful that you're all here. And if you have any friends that could benefit from anything I'm doing, send them my direction. You have my email, my website. If you go to my website and you put in your name and email, you automatically get a freebie, which is how to tell whether your memory loss is normal or not. And that's another question that people want to know. Is my memory loss normal or not? And I have a nice checklist, and I give that out for free if you give me your email. So I hope that was helpful. Thank you for joining me. You can email me questions, and I wish everyone a wonderful Shabbos.
Rena, thank you so much. That was amazing. I know I personally got some things, and I think now maybe I will not have to figure out if I put the key in the door or not, because that's always a big one. I'm halfway down the block, and oh my gosh. And of course, you always did it right. But okay, anyway, thank you very, very much. And thank you all of you for joining us. Now, and I just want to make a couple of announcements. On Tuesday, we will be exploring cybersecurity and how to protect ourselves online. Now, this is important to listen. The program will be pre-recorded, and your registration will not be a Zoom registration. It will be actually directly through the OU, and you will get the link for that program probably about an hour or half an hour before the program. And at that point, you can watch it anytime you want. You won't see another one later that afternoon. So that is on Tuesday. Thursday, we'll be back to regular programming like we're doing right now. And we're very, very honored that Rabbi Moshe Hauer, incoming Executive Vice President of the Orthodox Union, will be talking about various matters of legacy. So that's what's on track for next week. Oh, by the way, today's program and also Tuesday's program, Memory 1 and 2. I know I did send that out on Tuesday to everybody. But even if you didn't find it, or we were going to send them both out together again as a package with Rena's other materials, and that would be either later today or tomorrow when the recording is done. So if you didn't get it before, you don't have to look through your emails. You're going to have it now. And you don't have to ask me about it. You're just going to get it. Just check your emails. The email comes from me, Steinig J, or else it'll say Judy Steinig. Again, we want to thank our partnering synagogues, who are doing such a wonderful job of helping us spread the word about this program. By the way, I don't know that people know, you see a couple of hundred people on each time. What you don't know is there are also hundreds of people watching it later on. This program started before Pesach, for those of you that were with us, with about 30 people. We just used to toss out the links like everybody else. But because of the Zoom bombers and those registrations, I know that you find annoying, but they help this program grow. As of Rena's first program, we had over 1,400 people involved over the last few months. So it's, Baruch Hashem, it's really been growing, and we hope it will continue to grow. And if your synagogue is not listed on the group of partnering synagogues, speak to your rabbi or president or an authorized person, and we will be very, very happy to include them if the synagogue will help us promote the program. So again, Rena, thank you so much. Thank all of you. I thank all of you for joining us. Have a great rest of the day. Have a good Shabbos. Be safe and healthy. As I said, Tuesday, we're not going to actually see each other, but you will see the program. But Thursday, we'll be back as we are today. Take care, everybody. Thank you again.
Thank you.